purpose of tonight's meeting is really to just do a brief review of the budget presentation by the Board of Education, and then adjourn to tomorrow's referendum, all-day referendum. So what I'm first going to do is going to ask the board make a brief presentation, tell us a little bit about the budget.
Before that, I'd like to introduce Superintendent Dr. Shook to say a few words about his presence and budget.
Well, thank you for this large crowd that showed up this evening to welcome me. Just kidding. Thank you to our audience out there watching. I feel very honored and privileged to be serving as superintendent here in Regional School District 13. I came in the middle of the budget process, so I want to also give a shout out to Dr. Serino, who started the budget process with Kim and with the rest of the team. And I have tried to do my best to understand the needs of the school district and to support the budget as best that I can, but I will be very honest and transparent in saying that I've had to depend on the wisdom of others to get us to this point, but I'm very pleased with where we are, and that includes the board members that are here tonight along with Kim, and a lot of our staff that are not present here this evening. So I'm very thankful to be part of this presentation this evening, and I think a year from now I'll feel even better because I'll have been through an entire year. And I'm also hopeful that this time next year we're not wearing masks and there are a few more people in the audience. But I really do appreciate those of you that did come out this evening. So thank you, and I'll turn things back over to Bob.
Thank you. As Dr. Shook said, this budget process began in October with staff and administrators getting their proposals. Went through several iterations before Doug got here, and since then we've had a retreat and 4 meetings on the budget, and including a public hearing a few weeks ago. Just to go quickly through the budget. The gross budget that you'll be voting on tomorrow is $37,022,976. It's a negative 0.93% reduction from last year. The net budget, on which the town's tax base is gone up by 2.5% to $35,470,647. And we'll talk about that, why it went up. This is the breakdown of what it costs of both Durham and Middlefield. And you can see there's the $35 million is divided into the budget allocation by percentage, and for Durham it's 66.74 based on student population, and Middlefield 33.26. The allocation for Durham is 23 million, and for Middlefield it's 11 million plus, and minus the ECS grants from the state. And then the net cost to the town is $20 million, $507,377 to Durham, and $9,960,033 to Middlefield. So that's the net cost then is over last year is about a $745,000 increase to Durham and $122,752 increase to Middlefield. This is the per pupil expenditure, I know, which Carl is anxious to talk about. And that you can see over the last several years. In 2019 was $20,510, and 2020 was $22,012. And you'll see that there was a big jump there because the student population went down quite a bit that year. The next year didn't go down as much as the current year we're in, except these are just currently still estimated to some degree, waiting for the final year to end. But that's $22,712, and it's up by $700. And next year, anticipated, again, just an estimate, is $23,960, or a $1,248 increase. And you can see the reasons for that. That big, this change from 20 to 21 was smaller because there's only 47 students declined in the population. And this year we expect 77 students to leave the school system. And that is the single largest driver of the cost per student. This year, there's a number of things that happened. In the current year's budget, as we went into it last year, as you remember, the vote was just taken by the board. It wasn't a referendum based on the emergency actions. And with our discussions with the town, we asked that we have no increase in the budget last year to the town's cost. And in order to do that, we had to use virtually all of $2 million of our surplus and fund balance. And that allowed us to have a zero budget increase for the town, both towns last year. And there was concern was that with the COVID, there may be unemployment, there may be people not willing to pay taxes or increases, and so the effort was made to use that. That was resulted with only $600,000 available for our fund balance to apply to the budget this year. But throughout the savings this year, Kim has held back spending in almost every area. A lot of things didn't happen. A lot of sports events didn't happen. A lot of busing didn't happen. Not a lot of substitutes for hires, and all kinds of things that happened during the year saved money. So another $400,000 was gleaned out of this year's budget to add back to the surplus. So when we first came out with the budget, it was the net budget was a lot higher than it is today, but because we were able to put $400,000 back in from this year's surplus, we were able to reduce it to 2.5%. The salaries are up by 2.3%. Health insurance and benefits are up by up by 4 or 5%.
1.5.
1.5%. And the district-wide capital needs have increased. We've put together some more, and we'll go over that in detail in the next couple of pages. The decreases were in debt service. We had planned to issue a major $6.9 million debt last year. Because we had an energy project through Eversource and others, we were able to offset some of those costs and didn't need to issue the debt. And also included that was the new culvert under Pickett Lane, and that was, we put that off waiting for a grant. And so that's been delayed. So we haven't actually had to issue that debt yet. So one of the big decreases is because we haven't begun to pay. We haven't issued the debt, so we haven't begun to pay back on it. We also reduced 3 full-time equivalents in staff, and we reduced purchase services wherever we could. Because of established class size guidelines, we reduced 3 positions. 2 were at John Lyman School and 1 at Strong. And the capital is where we've had an increase to $360,000 this year. Normally we're around $300,000. And that's, some of it was, we had originally in the budget a little bit more in turf replacement, but the bench warmers asked us if we could replace the scoreboards at all of the fields, of the 2 baseball and softball field and in the gym, because they're very old and the softball one isn't working. And they agreed to provide $15,000 for that if we would fix them. So we moved some money out of turf replacement, which isn't going to be necessary next year, to putting in the scoreboards, and that's where that $27,000 came from. The other large one is the Sprinkler Pump House on Pickett Lane. In conversion from the water system into the school, we had to put a new pressure control on that, and that required a new pump station to control and reduce the pressure from this Middletown system into the school. A normal classroom replacement and any unanticipated maintenance throughout the year makes up the the total capital. And we've shown this debt service thing several years now. We originally planned to have a constant debt of around 1.5 million debt service and maintain that as a steady capital improvement program for all of our schools. But that, since we didn't issue it last year, you'll see a large drop down in the first orange column there, the first blue and orange column. And next year, as this debt gets issued, the debt service will begin to rise again back to where we were. And then it begins to fall off as all the other debt on the school drops off by 2025. So that we do have a lot of capacity in the future to maintain a steady debt service in order to keep up with the capital needs of all the buildings. And this is, I think, one of the most important charts of the whole thing, is that over the last 6 years, our budget has steadily decreased. We're coming in at a budget this year still almost $500,000 less than it was in 2015-16. And also on the net budget, we're still below the 2015-16 budget by another $100,000. This is because of the budget work that's been done by this board, and by the staff, by the administration, is to keep our budget really constant. The big drop occurred in closing Corn School in 2016 and 17. You can see the large drop there. And this savings is with us every year for less principals, less administrators, less janitors, less clerks. And so that is where we are, and that's the current budget for this year. So with that, I'll turn it back to Tom, and if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Bob. I've been where they are. We've put a lot of work into this budget. I know how hard it is to piece it together, so thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you for the presentation. If anybody would like to ask questions or make comments, I ask you to step up to the microphone, identify yourselves, and the folks up here will do their best to give you answers. And then when we're done with that, we will vote to adjourn to tomorrow's referendum. So have at it. Anybody who wishes to speak? Yep.
From the online people?
No.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Are they able to ask questions?
No.
So since Bob mentioned my name, because I brought it up the other night, the cost per pupil is very significant. And I was wondering if you could explain so that other people understand what is causing that significant increase. I'm sure one of the significant increases is causing it is the excess building space that we have. We have extra space in these buildings that's not being utilized efficiently.
So I'll be happy to address that. Can you hear me? So really, per pupil expenditures is a state calculation where we provide our yearly expenditures. And then from that, it's divided by the number of students that you have enrolled in your district. With declining enrollment, that denominator keeps getting smaller every year. And without the numerator decreasing, you can see why per pupil, it's just a math equation. It's just going to go up if you don't reduce your expenditures. Enrollment is based on, it's not just the number of students in the district. The state will give you certain qualifiers, such as if you run a pre-K program, they'll give you extra credit if you go over 180 days. So there's a couple of different, I call them kickers, that will increase your bottom number. but not enough to make a difference. So what really is going to move that number down is a large millions of dollars reduction in your numerator before you're going to see any real movement.
And the board has addressed that, by continuing to look at the cost of Lyman School to keep that open. And if you read my newsletter, you can see that there's a 1.2 to 1.4 savings if that school were to close. And that, again, is a large thing that will reduce the total cost, just like it did when corn was back there.
Rick, do you want to speak?
I'd like a clarification on, Carl asked about people that are viewing this from their homes. They're not allowed, they have no way to access the meeting and ask questions?
I don't think they can from this district meeting because it was announced to go live.
Is there anybody watching?
I don't know, Bryden?
26 people viewing from home.
26 people.
I have a question about the brief explanation, real short, on dues and fees and in-house tuition.
What was your question, Rick? What are they?
Brief description of what it is.
Kim?
So dues and fees represents district dues and memberships. So different memberships that we may have for professional organizations, for administrators, teachers. That also includes different dues for sports organizations when they compete in different championships, shoreline championships. That all goes in there. Robotics membership, we had a decrease in that this year because we're paying for the robotics membership out of a grant. So that's a competition entry fee. So that's what goes into those dues and fees, or professional organizations and any kind of events that the students may be participating in.
Yeah, I didn't quite get that, but basically, let me just run it back by again. Are students having to pay fees to participate in activities?
Oh, well,
Or
these
the
are
program.
district paid fees here. Did not continue with the pay to participate. We did get rid of that last year, so they are not paying to participate this year. If there may be, which we didn't have any field trips this year, but should there be a field trip somewhere, sometimes maybe there's a little bit charged at the school level, but we're not charging for playing in any sports or activities.
Is football still part of the program in athletics?
Yes, it is, and it's part of a co-op.
How many systems are participating in that program under the Cognachog label?
It's a total of 3, including Cognachog.
3 other systems?
2 others.
Altogether.
Altogether.
2. It was brought up at the meeting when they were bringing the program into the district that there wasn't a population that would sustain a football team, and we did it anyway. And it started out because of the startup cost at over $80,000. It was about half and half, 40 to run it, 40 some odd to bring it in. That's a sport where the injuries are cumulative, and they may or may not show up later, especially if there's no autopsy. It's not a question of whether we're doing it safely. I'm sure we're abiding by all the guidelines and maybe exceeding them, but we should eliminate that from the program for the health and protection of the students and the future of our residents. Another question on the mechanics of the fund balance. There's a considerable amount of money in there. How do you move that money out of there?
Every year, that money is moved back into the budget.
It's just done at the board level?
By state statute, you have the money in your fund balance. You can use that, an estimated amount, to offset the budget that you're building for the upcoming year, which is what we did last year and this year. In the past, what the district has done is they've waited for the out year, the next year, simply because that number is actual and audited at that point. It's not an estimate. So by state statute, whatever's left as a surplus at the end of the year goes to balance your upcoming year budgets. There's not a significant amount left in there anymore, because we used a big piece of it last year to balance the budget. And so, you know, it was rising, but it did take a big fall last year.
Okay, for example, if the fund balance is X dollars, can you move X dollars anywhere you want for any one item or several items? Or is it tied into certain items?
So it doesn't offset any specific expenditure, it goes as revenue, which, yeah, then you can increase your expenditures anywhere you desire because you have that revenue to offset it.
So you have, the education system has access to funds that they don't particularly account to the general public for, they can spend throughout the year for undesignated,
No.
unknown terms.
No, it's accounted for every year in the budget, so you will see every year what the amount of fund balance is being transferred in to balance the budget. So it's never unknown, and simply what that does is that offsets the amount of the town assessments pay. So the higher amount you transfer, the lower the increase is to the towns. We had an increase because we went lower. We used a lot of our fund balance last year, so it didn't leave a whole lot for this year. So even though our expenses went down 0.93, the amount that the towns are paying is actually going to rise because we utilized a great deal of that fund balance last year.
Because it's a regional system, the funds is separated somewhat from the general population, and we don't have the control or access to it that we would at the town level. And it's quite a bit of money. The other thing I'd like to say is, make a general comment, if I may, Tom, in regards to education. I believe everyone in education made their best efforts to contend with the times that we're in. It's very unfortunate that we had to go this route, but I think everybody tried to do the right thing by the students and the staff, and it's tough. Time may tell that things could have been done differently, but you know, we didn't experience this before. The other thing is, did the state, do we have any protection from, because we're a regional system, if the state adjusts the projections of what they're going to give us, and they fall short of the mark like Malloy did, leave us hanging in the bag, the school system, because it's regional, their budget is passed and they don't have to make any adjustments, but we would have to absorb it at the town level, and that's considerable, whereas a conventional municipality is able to make adjustments right across the board. Has that situation been rectified?
I don't think there's been any change, as far as I know, to any of the formulas.
Well,
except
the
for the amount of
governor's budget, proposed budget, held the ECS funding flat, so we would get the same amount as we did last year. However, the Appropriations Committee came in with a different sort of theory where they wanted to implement the ECS phase-out, which phase in, phase-out, I'm not sure what it's called, but where they would increase funding in alliance districts and phase out funding in non-alliance districts, which is where we are. So it depends on which budget gets passed. Durham is scheduled to lose about $122,000, and Middlefield maybe in the area of $40,000 should the appropriations budget go through. So the numbers that I used for the town assessments in this budget proposal are the governor's proposed budget, because that's what we had at the time. Governor Malloy did hold back ECS funds a few years ago, but that was addressed statutorily that can't happen mid-year anymore, that it needs to happen during the budget cycle. So we will know when the state budget passes. But oftentimes our budget, well, every time our budget goes up for referendum before the state.
By the way, the questions and opinions are solely mine, represented no one but myself. I'm a lobbyist of one for Richard C. Parmley Jr., period. The way to rectify that dilemma with the state is to have them, when they make that figure, they have to stand behind it. They can't just, walk away from the table and take money away from us that they promised us. That's not right, it's not fair, especially in a regional system. We're definitely at a handicap and a complete disadvantage. and we don't have equality with other systems. Thank you.
Mr. Parmalee, I wanted to answer one of your questions you had asked too about the in-house tuition. That represents our MTA program, the tuition that other districts pay for our Middlesex transition, and also our preschool program, parents pay tuition.
I've been a local opponent in its entirety for any type of activity fees for students in a public system. It's not whether I support the program or not support it. The taxpayers should, whether they're retired, never had any children in the system, or send their kids to private school for 12 years. It's an obligation to the community to furnish that education and to furnish it on an equal basis to everyone who walks through the doors of the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Did you wish to speak? If not, I could take... Everybody has spoken at once, so yes. You want more, Carl?
Well,
Should we let him?
He hasn't been here in like a year. I mean, yeah, I think it's okay.
See your face, though.
I know.
Thank you all. You've been in all year. Thank you.
We miss you.
Miss
We
you, Paul.
miss you, Carl.
Carl Stout, in case anybody doesn't realize it, is listening. One of the other things I meant to address, the student population dropped 137 from last year. That adds significant to the student cost per pupil. Do we have any kind of an estimate of what we're going to be losing this coming year? Something's got to, we've got to do something here somehow or another with this thing. You can't keep going this way. The costs are just getting outrageous.
Because the estimate this year is 77 loss.
Another 77 this year. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Thanks, Carl. I think we are in a position for a motion to adjourn to tomorrow's referendum. May I hear a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn to tomorrow.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned to vote tomorrow. You folks out there, make sure everybody gets out and votes. It's very important. Thank you all.